I was supposed to die in prison. I had a sentence of 29 years to life, and I ended up doing 20 years out of those 29 to life. My name is Mopak, and this video is not to glorify anything. It's my truth, and hopefully this can give perspective to somebody out there. I was raised in the 80s and 90s during this gang culture in Los Angeles. I grew up in the MacArthur Park area, which was like every other block had a different gang. And during this period, it seemed like almost everybody, my friends, everybody were somehow getting involved with that were already heading towards gangs. It was just a culture back then, especially in these neighborhoods. Then we didn't really have much going for ourselves. Our parents weren't really involved in our lives, or they didn't know how basically to raise kids themselves. I'm not gonna justify why I ended up hanging out with kids who were heading in the wrong direction. That would be like not taking accountability, and I'm responsible for everything that I did. But I started reaching out to kids who we all wanted to have like some kind of family, some kind of role model. And these times, like, what stood out was these kids who were heading in a direction of what I thought at the time was like something to look up to, because they were strong and they were hardcore. And I felt that this is something that I needed. I think I needed it. I know that I didn't have a father figure. This is something I was looking for. Just like me, we were all looking for the same thing, just family of some sort. Yeah, I knew that they were heading in the wrong direction because of the things that we started doing. We were doing drugs. We started doing small crimes like vandalism, and then that led to bigger crimes, and eventually it became to a point where I was doing really bad things. Ended up getting in a gang, and it's crazy because I didn't get into a gang that we all were my childhood friends. They ended up getting different gangs, and we evolved from there. But I think the structure was already built. The resentment, the anger towards society, before I was a gang member, I had been jumped. There was issues at school of bullying that led me to like lash out. Like I had anger. And because of this, I started doing crimes that particularly were more violent than usual. I already had a reputation, for being upfront and confrontational, and plus my anger. I really exploded on people, and people that sometimes, I was close to. So this kind of like built up on itself, and I became more aggressive with time. I think that this particular area, because of the way that everybody was growing up everybody was surrounded by gangs. And due to that fact, like that's all we knew, unfortunately. And we believed that this was the way things were going. It was things were supposed to be. And it wasn't the truth, but this was my truth. And I ended up falling for it. So I started committing more crimes that were more violent in nature, more felonies. And I started going to jail real early in life. Like I started at 13 years old. I went to juvenile hall, and then it snowballed from there because I continuously went to jail for different reasons. Each particular time was worse. I think I had an idea that I was gonna go to jail eventually one day for something more devastating. Eventually it ended up going that way. Once I started becoming a little bit more violent towards people, and that's where I was progressing. I was becoming more violent towards people, and that led me to more of a callous person. I was more callous. I was more hateful. I didn't really care about anybody but myself, and that led to me doing wrong things. For those wondering, my crime was gang related. I won't get into the details because, like I said in the beginning, I'm not looking to glorify what I did or glorify that lifestyle, which today, the way that I look back, I really hate that lifestyle. I think it's a stupid waste of time, but that's how I was raised. That's the life I chose to live. It was my choice, so I ended up living this life and I ended up doing these things because they were my choices. It was nobody else's responsibility but mine at the end of the day. Sorry for the background noise. This is Mexico, and every other household has dogs, so you will hear dogs everywhere. So, back to my point was in 1995, I was sentenced to life in prison. They gave me a sentence of 29 years to life. And when I received the sentence, when I got sentenced, I didn't know at the time, like it didn't register. Like I knew that they had said 29 to life. I knew that I was gonna spend the rest of my time in prison, but it didn't just register. It was kind of difficult because I remember them saying you're gonna get 29. You're getting 29 years to life, and to me, it was more like, yeah, okay, I understand that, but it didn't dawn on me because at first it was not something that you can actually understand, and you don't really understand it till you're doing the time, because then 1 year goes by, then 2 year goes by, then 3 years goes by, then four, then five, then six, and then you come to a realization like this is what life means. You're not getting out. Put that into perspective, that's an eternity. Most people, they don't understand what being away from their family is like. For 20 years, so many birthdays, so many events that you miss out on. And for those who are barely around 20 some years old or even 30 years old, that's most of your life that I was that somebody like me was in prison. So it's a long time. And when you sit in prison, it's kind of difficult, you know, to deal with. But at the same time, it's something that you're justly convicted of. So now you have to face reality. And the reality is being in prison a long time is very difficult on your mind. But every day, it's one day forward. And as time goes by, you wonder if you're ever going to get out. And you know that you're probably not. So you just adapt to it and you just live every single day like another day. And but you're hopeful. You're always hopeful that it's gonna happen. But for the most part, in prison, I didn't change. I was continuing the lifestyle that led me to going to jail. It wasn't up until my wife came into my life. I've known my wife since I was 17. She was 14. I'm currently 52. And we were just pen pals. She would write to me and we kept in touch. But the last 5 years of my sentence, we ended up getting together and she eventually married me in prison. And she didn't even know that I was going to get out of jail. She had no idea that I was going to get out of. But she married me, and it was a turning point for me because I decided that I wanted to really fight to somehow get out of prison. So I started changing my life around. I started going into self-help groups and I started really determining myself to find a way to get out of jail and not continue living the lifestyle that I had. She is everything to me, so I made the effort that I could to turn my life around and better myself. And thankfully, I met this lawyer who she was retired, but she wanted to give back to society what society had given to her. So it was hard because I reached out to her many times throughout the years and she wouldn't respond to me. I knew that she would help people, but one of her clauses was that the person had to be completely changed and she had to for certain that that person changed in order for her to help you. So for years I wrote to her and she didn't answer me until one day she decided to, because of my wife reached out to her as well, she decided to go to prison. And then she said, look, I can't help him because I have a lot of clients. But when I go to that prison, I'm gonna pull him out of his and talk to him. So that's what happened. She talked to me and she ended up helping me with what she could. And maybe 5 or 6 months into it, that she would continuously take me out every time she went to prison. She asked me who was representing me at my board hearing. And I told her, and she told me that she was going to represent me, which meant the world to me, as you can imagine, because this is going to be somebody who really believed in me and knew that I have really changed. But let me just be clear about something so that you guys are aware is that before you go to board, you go to psychological hearings, you go to evaluations, you have to show that you completely change and you're no longer a risk to society. You have to be able to prove this by the documentation, the paperwork, the classes, and once you go to board, it's a board of ex police officers, ex judges, lawyers who sit on this board that are hired by the state to interview you. And this interview is more like a 4 hour, 3 to 4 hour interview. And they ask everything in the world because they want to know exactly how you're going to respond. What do you know about your life? The insight into your life. And you have to be able to explain this to a degree where they understand that you understand. And the reasons what led you to commit this crime to that lifestyle. You have to be able to explain it in detail. And fortunately, I was found suitable and no longer a risk to society. What was the hardest part about doing 20 years in prison? It's an emotional, draining place. It saps you from everything, takes away from your dignity, from everything that you are. It's very emotionally draining. The loneliness, the missing out on your family, you know. And I take accountability of, yes, I understand that, you know, the other side of the coin, which is the victims, they were robbed of that as well. I'm fully aware of that and I do understand that and I'm responsible for that. But that's what being in prison is like for 20 years. There's an ugly side to that, that completely changes you. Fortunately for me, it changed me into a better person because one thing that I lacked before was empathy. I lacked empathy. I lacked responsibility. I lacked understanding the repercussions. And today, I'm very tolerant, and understanding. And I try, and I think, the most important thing that I do have now is I think before anything. I'm always aware. I was mindful, of things, as opposed to before I was just impulsive and reactive. So it's helped me in that benefit, now that I'm a completely different person. And I look back and I really just like that lifestyle. I can't stand that lifestyle. I look at people who are in that lifestyle, it basically, like, I'm angered by it because it's such a waste of time, such a false way of life. And another thing that how prison changed me was that, the way I look at life today is that I think it's beautiful. Life is beautiful and I'm blessed. And every day is another day, another chance, that I have. And I take it for what it is. And I strive every day to make it, to make up for all the loss of time. And this second chance, I try to make the best out of it, so that I don't regret, that I didn't try hard amongst everything else. Be grateful that I have the second chance of life, that I have a family, that I have my beautiful wife, that she's been there for a long time and continues to be there strongly invested for the length of our life, to be married and stay married and enjoy life. There were times when we were in jail that we used to walk laps in a visiting room, a tiny little visiting room, and we used to go in circles. And she would tell me, like, I envision us walking in the park. I envision us like walking in the beach, and all those things came to fruition. And today, that's the things that we look back on and remember, and we're grateful for that we have this ability to do this today. And I take that for what it's worth. I'm very grateful for that. The reason why I'm making this channel, the reason why I'm speaking out about my life and what I've encountered, is due to the current events, you know, in the United States and the things that are happening. And what I want people to take from this story is that, just being deported doesn't mean that it's the end of life. You know, it took me a long time. It took us a long time, me and my wife, a long time to build what we have today. But we have a very beautiful life, and we're able to do so many things. We were able to build a business. We were able to have a home. We have our own home, and life is beautiful out here in Mexico. And I just want to be able to encourage people that it's possible. And even though that you're separated from your family, you're gonna find a way to connect. You're gonna find a way to have closeness, and you're gonna build a life out here, and it's gonna be great. You don't necessarily, this ain't necessarily the end of it, because I'm a living proof of going through the worst and living the worst and coming out here and surviving and living a beautiful life and having a wonderful life and being successful in many areas of my life. And I'm grateful that I'm here in Mexico. I'm actually grateful that I was deported, because I have a whole new perspective and a whole new love for life. Most people take it for granted because everything's given to them and it's easier when you live in the States. But now that you're in Mexico, it's not as easy. It's really difficult. There's nothing given to you, and it's hard, but you have to work for it. And I understand that more than anybody else, because it's been really hard. But thankfully, and praise God that we were able to overcome all these obstacles of living in Mexico, in a foreign country, which is very difficult to live in. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you get something out of this story, and I hope that I'm able to entertain you a little bit with my experiences with my life. And I hope that you can subscribe and hit that like button and drop a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you've been through something like that. Let me know if you're going through a hard, difficult time, or just enjoy this type of content, man. Until next time.